Is that what everybody's here for? All right, good deal. Before we get going, I just want to give you guys a little bit of a forecast on what to expect. So this is a 2-hour cave tour. The total distance that we're going to be covering is 3/4 of a mile. A lot of people see 3/4 of a mile and they think that that sounds very easy, but it's a moderately difficult cave tour that we're going to be doing. We're going to be going, doing lots of ups and downs in this compacted into this 3/4 of a mile. But the way it's going to start, even before we get to the start of that distance, is that we're going to go down a staircase. It's a spiraling staircase that goes down almost 300 stairs. It goes all the way down to 250 feet underground. As we're going through that staircase, we'll be going through a lot of narrow passageways. Some of these passageways are so narrow that I have to take my hat off of my head because the brim of my hat is too wide to fit through those places. And I got to turn my hat sideways, and I got to turn myself sideways to be able to go through there. So if you're not comfortable with tight spaces, you might not like this tour very much. And also, while we're going down that staircase, there's about 5 or 6 different vertical pits that we're going to be walking over. There's a couple of these pits that drop down over 100 feet. And you know they drop down over 100 feet because there's a railing that stops you from going over the edge, and that railing only goes to about right here to me. I can lean over and look all the way down to the bottom. So if you don't like heights, if you get vertigo really bad, then you might not like this tour very much because there's a few of those that we'll be walking over on that staircase. Once we get to that bottom, once we get to the lowest level of our tour at 250 feet underground, that's kind of where the tour begins. That 3/4 of a mile, that's where it starts at. We don't gain any distance while we're going down that staircase. Things open up once we get down there. There's no more tight spaces, but that's where the hills start. We're going to be going up and down, up and down, up and down, slowly ascending our elevation back towards the surface. So if you don't like stairs, if you don't like hiking, then this might not be the tour for you. I'm not trying to scare you away from the tour, but as you can tell, I'm not a car salesman. My main goal is for you guys to be safe and for you guys to enjoy your journey today. If you don't enjoy the journey, then there's not much of a point in going on it. You're just going to have a bad time. So you know yourself better than I know you. So if you have any heart or breathing problems, if you have bad knees, if you've had recent knee surgeries or anything like that, anything that could...
This is a final call for the 9:30 Domes and Dripstones Tour, now departing from Shelter B. Final call, 9:30 Domes and Dripstones Tour from Shelter B.
Yeah, anything that could inhibit your movement, anything that could go wrong with you in the cave, just be aware of that. If something does happen to you, it's going to take several hours to get you out. Me and my partner Alicia, the one who just made that last call, she'll be out here in a moment. Me and her have both been there personally for rescue operations that took over 6 hours to get people off of this very tour that we're going on. There's no magical elevator that's going to take you out. We're not Disney World. Our cave is real, and it's going to take a real effort to actually get you out. Once you're out of the cave, it's about a 45-minute ride to the nearest hospital, about an hour and 45 minutes to the nearest good hospital. So just keep that in mind. Am I scared anybody away yet? Alright, good deal. Just a couple things to keep in mind from this point on is that there's no food or drinks other than water allowed on the buses or in the cave. So if you have anything other than water, there's a trash can right over there, or you can just put it up and I won't ever see it. Just don't take it out in the cave. There's also no weapons allowed past this point. We do have lockers over there if you have to stash any weapons. And with that, there's no flash photography allowed in the cave, so go ahead and figure out how to turn the flash off on your device. And we'll get that taken care of either now or on the bus ride over. And also, let's see here. Go ahead and get your tickets out. And we'll give those tickets to one responsible person in your party. Make it the most responsible person. All right. And we'll go ahead and take those tickets and we'll start loading up the buses. And if you have any questions or concerns before we load up, you can feel free to come and ask. We'll start with that first one there. Yeah, we'll start with the first bus. Have you been on other?
That's in there. city.
Yeah. Bigger now.
Yeah. No, it doesn't.
Yeah.
It is a house, I guess.
He wasn't kidding.
Okay, another stairs.
The other stairs.
I can't see it. Where?
Everybody like the staircase? I love that staircase. I do. I think I'm a little biased. Huh? Yeah. I'm a little biased. I think that staircase is worth the price of this tour. That's just me personally. It is. It is. You know, a lot of people, especially a lot of rangers, call the Frozen Niagara the grand finale of this tour. I think that staircase. I think that beats the Frozen Niagara. What do you think? Now, you know, we're not the first people to go down there, obviously. We're not going to be the last people, at least I sure hope not. But the first people who went down where we just did it back in the 1920s. There was a gentleman, his name was George Morrison. He was from Ohio. And he's from Ohio. He came to this part of the country because he heard a lot of people out here were striking oil and making it rich. And he was an entrepreneur. He was an oil man. He was a surveyor. That's what he did best. He was a surveyor. And, he came here and he bought up a bunch of pieces of property. And he started drilling for oil. And he didn't find a whole lot. He actually earned the nickname Dry Hole George while he was here. And he was getting ready to go back to Ohio with his tail between his legs. And his Kentucky friend, his buddy that he made while he was down here, told him, he said, "Hey George, before you go back up to Ohio, you should go over to the Mammoth Cave. They do cave tours over there. You should go check it out." And George, he thought that sounded like a pretty good idea. Keep in mind, this is back in the 1920s. And this is back in the 1920s. And Mammoth Cave was a privately owned establishment. It was called the Mammoth Cave Estates. And it was world famous. They had been giving cave tours ever since 1816. So at this point, they had been giving cave tours for over 100 years. They were world famous. And here's George, this new guy on the scene. He goes on a cave tour. He loves it. Goes on another, loves it. But while he's underground, going on these Mammoth Cave tours, his surveying instincts, if that's a thing, kicks in. And he realizes that these passageways that they're walking through are so expansive that they have to extend past the Mammoth Cave property line. There's no way that they can't. And in Kentucky and a lot of other states, whatever you own on the surface, you own all the way down to the center of the earth. Now, keep in mind, George, he didn't make it rich with oil like he had planned. But he got a new idea. Maybe he could strike it rich doing what everybody else around here was doing, and that was giving cave tours, just like Mammoth Cave was. And he starts buying property all around Mammoth Cave Estates, all around it. And he starts looking for cave, and he finds little ones here and there, but he doesn't really find anything that he knows that guests aren't going to pay money to go in there and see these little tiny caves. But he hears rumors about a big depression, not seasonal depression, a big geological depression in the earth that there was cold air coming up through the ground, coming up in between the rocks, through the dirt. And neighborhood kids would go and they'd play at the bottom of this big depression. You guys know what that was? A sinkhole. That's right. Did you guys see a sinkhole today? You guys remember the practice stairs that we walked down? We were walking down into that sinkhole. And George, he went and found it. And he did what he had to do. He goes to the hardware store and he gets his favorite digging tool, dynamite. He gets a big long rope and he gets a really nice lantern. And him and his colleagues, they head back to the sinkhole. Well, they blast open 15 feet. The first door that we walked through to that second door, they blasted open with dynamite, exposing everything else that was carved out by water, carved out by nature. That sinkhole where that water had been funneled into the ground, making these underground passageways. And it exposes all of that. And George looks at his colleagues, and they all know what they have to do then. And George does what any brave man would do. He takes that big long rope. He goes up to a big tulip poplar tree, ties one end of it around the tree, takes the other end of the rope, and ties it around his young nephew, Earl. And he says, Earl, go see what's down in that hole. He doesn't really kick him, I don't think. But Earl, he's making his way down and down and down. And eventually Earl gets to the end of his rope. And he yells up at George. He says, George, we're going to need a bigger rope. George, he throws one down. Earl ties it together. He continues with his descent. And he keeps going down and down, going down those big vertical pits, squeezing his way through those tight little passageways. And George, he eventually followed once he knew it was safe. And they both came out right here. And when George walked in here, he named this room Grand Central Station, where they just came from. You guys remember that low, smooth passageway? Mm-hmm. That's called the New York Subway. If you go back that way, it's called the New York Hippodrome. If you go up ahead, you'll see the Frozen Niagara. You see a pattern here. He's naming things in the cave of places from where he was originally from, New York. He came here from Ohio. He was born and raised in New York. He was proud of it. And a lot of wealthy people back then that could go on cave tours back in the 1920s, that's where a lot of them were coming from. And he wanted to put on the brochures these names so that people could relate to it and be enticed to come here and see these things that they were familiar with, but underground. It'd be a pretty cool experience. But how long did it take us to get in here? What? 10 minutes or so? Yeah, I could agree with that. About 10 minutes. It took George and Earl 2 weeks to get down here. 2 weeks. Took a long time, right? But when George got down here, he realized that he finally had enough cave that he could finally start giving cave tours. So he puts a sign out by the road that says George Morrison's Cave, but no one's stopping. Everybody driving through is going over to the world famous Mammoth Cave. He's definitely in their shadows, for sure. And he has to get crafty. He's an entrepreneur after all. He has to get crafty. So he puts a new sign out by the road that says the new entrance to Mammoth Cave. And people start stopping, especially when he dresses up a few of his employees to look a lot like Kentucky State Troopers. Gives them flags, sends them out by the road, and guess who doesn't like that? And they start flagging cars down as they're on their way to Mammoth Cave. They start flagging them down, asking them, hey, where are you going? Where are you headed? Oh, we're heading over to the Mammoth Cave for the weekend. Oh, you don't want to go over there. They just had a rock fall last week, and those rocks are still falling. You don't want to go over there. It's dangerous. Where are you headed? Oh, we're going over to the Mammoth Cave. Ah, you don't want to go over there. They're all dying of tuberculosis. You don't want to go over there. It's nasty over there. Come over here. Come to the new entrance of Mammoth Cave. It's new. It's fresh. Come on in. And people start doing it. People start pulling over, going to George Morrison's cave, going down the big wooden staircase that he built. And guess who doesn't like that very much when they start seeing their business getting dwindled? The Mammoth Cave. They don't like that one bit. And what do you do in the United States when you don't like somebody? You sue them. Yeah, you sue them. The last group I asked that, somebody said, you shoot them. So, Yeah, you sue them. Yeah, you take them to court. You take them to court. That's what Mammoth Cave did for using their good name. They've been building that reputation for over 100 years. And here comes this new kid on the block. He's taking their business. So they take him to court, and George, he gets crafty once again. He goes back into his cave. He starts looking for answers, and he knows what he's looking for. He comes across where he thought his cave ended, a big pile of broken down rocks. And as he's smoking his cigar, because that's what you did in the 1920s, as he was smoking his cigar, he watched the smoke of it traveling away from him, going towards that pile of broken down rocks, straight through it to the other side. That tells him there's more cave running. So George, he gets his favorite digging tool, once again, dynamite. His second favorite digging tool, Earl, and tells him to go open up the wall. And Earl does. And they blast open, and they walk on through. They keep walking. And that's when George comes across something that he's familiar with. He comes across a signature of one of the Mammoth Cave guides that he had met while he was going on his cave tours. He knew that he had connected to one of those tourist routes. So what he does next is they sort of hide off into the shadows, and they wait for Mammoth Cave tours to walk by, and right after the guide walks past them, they kind of hop out. Hey, you, come here. Yeah, you, come here. Who, me? Yeah, you. You've been on a cave tour for quite a while, haven't you? Yeah, we've been down here for about 6 hours. We've been walking for a long time. I'm tired. Well, what if I told you that I have an entrance just right over here, a nice staircase, going to take you back out to the surface. I've got cold water waiting for you. How's that sound? Well, what do you think, honey? Well, that sounds pretty good. So they start funneling these cave tours. They start siphoning these guests off of the cave tours. It's called cave tour pirating. And they take them off, and they're taking them up to the surface. Guess what these guests have to do when they get to the top? Oh, they don't pay anything. They probably got a ride, I'd say. But most of all, they have to sign a piece of paper, an affidavit at the top, stating, guess who doesn't like that? Walked in through the historic entrance of the Mammoth Cave, and then they came out of George Morrison's entrance without ever seeing daylight. And that held up in court that he was technically connected to the Mammoth Cave, and therefore was able to keep the name of the new entrance, the Mammoth Cave. But at the same time, he proved that he was trespassing to be able to do this. It didn't really matter a whole lot. Very shortly after, both parts of the cave were bought out by the state of Kentucky. They turned over to the federal government to become the national park that we're walking through today. George, he sold this part of the cave for over $200,000 here in the Great Depression. I think it was $290,000. Yeah, $290,000. That's pretty good. He made out pretty well. Him and his wife, they moved to Owensboro, Kentucky after that, and then just tragically, just a few years later, his wife died of a heart disease, and then George, he died exactly 1 year after his wife died on the anniversary. So, a little tragic end to George, but we can thank him for what he did to be able to find this part of the cave, find the Frozen Niagara, so that we can all walk through here today. Because the National Park Service, we don't blow open walls. So if George hadn't done it, there's a good chance it might not have ever been discovered, this area. So with that, would you guys like to see the cave, what it looked like before George and Earl walked in here? That means it's going to get really dark. So if you have any electronic devices that are on, if you have anything that's producing light, go ahead and do us a favor and turn it off. His guests too. And there's going to be another set of benches. It's probably the exact same benches because I know we haven't got new ones. But we're going to sit down there and we're going to learn a little bit about the geology of Mammoth Cave, or at least some parts of the geology of Mammoth Cave. We don't have all day to learn all of it. We're going to scratch the surface. And then we'll learn just a little bit more about George. Does that sound good to you guys? All right. Follow me.
You already took
We didn't take a single. It's all video.
Oh, I took pictures.
You need to email it to me. Oh man, this thing is done. Take my. I hope this will last until the next. This is actually much better than yesterday. You know what I mean? Graffiti right there. Oh wow, this is a very good.
What he was really good at doing was finding flat rocks and stacking them, putting them in certain spots to make a really nice trail to be able to walk on. And he built a couple staircases like that, and we'll get to see those briefly. We'll walk past them. Looks like we've all made it. Now, George He brought people through here. They sit down at these benches just like you guys are sitting here today. And while they were here, one day there was a little girl in the crowd. She was 6 or 7 years old. And she raised her hand when George asked if anybody had questions. She raised her hand. And he went up to the little girl and he said, "Yes, little girl, what's your question?" And after she got done crying, she asked. She said, "George, can you tell us about the fairy castles up on the ceiling?" "Fairy castles? What are you talking about?" She said, "Well, George, if you look up here, you've got the king's castle, you've got the queen's castle, with all the fairies lining up to get inside, so they can hop in her car and go across Ferry I-65, all the way to Ferrysburg." He really liked that. He said, "I really like that. I think I'm gonna name this room Fairy Ceiling." And that's how this room got its name, probably. Now, does anybody know what those are? Stalactites. Stalactites, because they're holding tight to the ceiling, right? Now let's pretend for a moment they were no longer dormant. Let's pretend like they were dripping. And there was a formation that started building upwards from those drips. What are those called? Stalagmites, because they might come up and trip you, right? Now, if you guys are so smart, if the stalagmite is going up, stalactite is going down, and they come together, what do you call them?
Column.
Oh, you guys are smart. Yeah, you call them a column. Now, when I first started working here, there was a ranger. They asked me that same question. They asked me the same question, and I said, "I call those pillars." And he said, "Well, you know, in Kentucky, we sleep on pillars, so we call those columns." They get worse. We're going to see a lot of really pretty formations towards the end of the tour when we get to the Frozen Niagara portion of the cave. Before we exit, that's what we'll be getting to. But I'm going to talk about this room. I'm going to talk about Fairy Ceiling a little bit. Do you guys notice anything different here than what we saw at Grand Central Station? The ceiling is really flat, isn't it?
Yeah.
But what about the walls? Kind of the opposite, huh? It's not really smooth, it's really jagged. It looks like a bunch of these rocks are about to fall, especially that big one right up there. You see that? Or maybe that one right there. Looks like it could fall any second.
Yeah.
So this, if you think of a cave, if you think of a limestone cave, when you think of it being formed, what do you think of coming through here? I already said it earlier. Yeah, you think of water, right? Water coming through the cave, carving out cave passageways. Do you guys think that this room was carved out by water? Maybe. How about this? How about we take a vote? We'll take a vote. If you think that this room was carved out by water, raise your hand. Okay. If you think this room was not carved out by water, raise your hand. All right. Well, I can tell that most of you are Americans. Well, only about 50% of you voted.
You're right.
I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to reveal the answer. This room was not carved out by water, but it is made possible by water. What water did do is it came underneath the passage. It came underneath, started carving out a waterway. This waterway got too wide. The ceiling could no longer support itself. And if you guys look over here, you'll see where it caved in. That's what we're walking on top of. We're walking on top of a cave. And when we go over the hill, just up ahead, we're going to go down a really narrow passage. And then it's going to open back up, and then the walls are going to be really smooth. They'll even have ripples on them. Where water was flowing through there, the ceiling will be nice and smooth. We'll be connected back to the original waterway that came underneath us, all the way out to the big breakdown that we walked up, the big break. And we'll be connected back to that. So, pretty cool transition to see. Now, before we get going, are there any questions?
Yes. I'm looking at that rock and you're saying, yeah, maybe, well, maybe.
All right. So
I mean, at some point, will this roof come down?
here's the thing. Here's the thing. When we have a sold-out tour group, there's not enough benches here for everyone. The other set of benches are underneath that pile of rocks.
Got it.
But, you know, whenever these broke down, whenever this passageway broke down, this is what we call it's all breakdown. Whenever all these rocks came tumbling, that was because they were weak. They were already weak rocks. They already wanted to fall. And everything that was weak has already fallen. Everything that was strong enough to withstand gravity, well, guess what? It's still withstanding that gravity. There's no change down here. So we don't have erosion. Earthquakes, they don't affect this far down into the earth. So we don't have to worry about earthquakes in here. There's, other than guests touching the rocks, there's really nothing else to worry about. Just the other day, I was trailing a tour, just like Alicia's doing. And we were going over where I said things are going to get a little narrow. Well, if you look to the right-hand side, there's a bunch of stacked up rocks, a big wall of stacked up rocks. And there was this fella, I see him, grabbing onto the rocks, trying to pull it out. I said, are you stupid? What are you talking about? What are you trying to do? I just want to see who's holding up the other rocks. What's your end game? What's the best case? What's the best scenario? Oh no, I just wanted to see. So, yes, touching the rocks. Dealing with that, those kinds of things happening is very rare. Most people have common sense. Well, that's most. But all in all, we don't have to worry about rock falls. There's even an insurance policy in place. On the back of your ticket, it says on there that in the event of a rock fall, then you'll be fully covered. Yes. Yeah, so all of this was attached. And you'll see just up ahead as we're walking past, you can see a better example of how this roof fell.
Okay. Yeah. Now there's nothing under it, now it's just all.
It's just all solid rocks. There might be little spaces here and there, because you can even look down there and see where you could go crawling down there. Yes?
You said we're like 250 feet below ground. If there were to be a substantial rock fall, would you be able to hear it above ground?
No.
No? I was just curious.
No.
Would like dust come out the hole?
No.
No?
No, nothing like that. If there was a rock fall close to the historic entrance, then if it was close enough to the entrance, sure, but it's not going to be like a big wall of dust going through the cave.
Do they have any seismographic stuff set up in the system?
Not in the cave. On the surface, sure. An earthquake, it kind of works like if you were in a swimming pool and you dropped something into the water and it made those ripples, or even like let's say a tsunami, for example. If the ocean is rocking and rolling, most of that's happening up on the surface. If you go under the water, you're not even going to know anything is happening up there. Same thing happens underground.
So when this fell, nobody knew.
Right. When this fell, this was millions of years ago.
Right, that's what I'm
Nobody
saying, nobody
existed.
knew.
Nobody existed. The crickets knew.
Yeah.
Probably scared the crap out of them.
And a lot more.
All right, before we get going, are there any other questions? All right, I'll move up to the front. You guys can follow me.
So the legs were
They caved in, they created this cave. It's pretty cool.
Okay, the original water
Was under us, okay? There's a water,
Yeah.
and then the roof is too weak. It caved in
Why would it cave in? There's
because
no
it was
water in
weak.
front, but there was no water up.
See,
Oh, okay.
See, the water is forcing its way through, right? Create a river. And the roof is at some point became weak because of the water. The roof dropped.
So this is
So
the
this
inside
is
open.
this is the cave that we're on right now. So the original water is under us.
So are these limestones too?
Yeah. It's not that strong, but you know, it's strong enough to withstand gravity. Look at that, huh?
Another pattern just like they received. Water came underneath, broke down a bunch of rocks, they all came tumbling down.
It seems like a really large, self-supporting
Yeah, it's doing a really good
piece of
job.
architecture here.
It's doing a good job so far, isn't it?
So far.
So far. So he asked about the trails and how the CCC did. So what they would do when they came in is they would use sledgehammers, pickaxes. They would break up the rocks that were already on the ground. They would crush them up, and then they took a thin layer of natural asphalt from the Rock Asphalt Company that is just outside the park. And they took that asphalt, they laid a thin layer over those broken down rocks, and then they took a layer of natural cave dirt and compacted it and compressed it on top of that asphalt. as you're moving along, you'll see places where that asphalt is starting to become exposed. These trails are old, they're from the 1930s, and all these little ripples that you see that give us the traction that we've got, that wasn't the original intention. That's just from years of foot traffic. That's where all those ripples are from, years of foot traffic. And you know, you guys are lucky in another way, not just that you get to go on a really small cave tour with a really small group, but this is the last time that anybody will get to walk on this historic trail. Well, this is the last season. They're going to shut down this part of the cave here, all the Grand Avenue route, where we do the accessible tour, the Wild Cave tour. They're shutting down this whole section of George's Cave, and they're going to go through and they're going to pour concrete over the historic trail and make it a little bit easier to walk on. So there's controversy with that. You know, you have to make sacrifices, I guess, and we're making the cave safer for people. Safety is always our number one concern, but at the same time, we have to sacrifice by covering up a little bit of our historical heritage here. So yeah, you're one of the last groups that'll get to walk on this historic trail. So enjoy it. Now, whenever we're going to be exiting the cave here shortly, not just yet, but here in just a little while, we'll be exiting the cave. And as we're going through, you guys are going to notice a bunch of creepy crawlies, if you haven't noticed them yet. Have you guys seen any?
No.
I saw some crickets.
Some of you have, some of you have.
I saw some
Well,
crickets.
when we're exiting the cave, we're going to see a bunch of cave crickets, also known as camel crickets, also known as basement crickets. We're going to see a whole bunch of them. But here's the thing. Back in the 1970s, Mammoth Cave actually had too many cave crickets. And there were so many of them that your trailing ranger would have to come ahead of the group with a broom and actually, well, they would have to come ahead and they would actually have to sweep off the benches just so people can sit down. That's how many cave crickets there were. And we had to do something about it. We did. We had to do something about it. And the National Park Service, we don't kill animals. So we relocated. We got a company from Michigan to come down here and extract the crickets alive.
Are you serious?
Yes. Yeah, they came in with big wooden boxes that had holes in them. They came in here with practically snow shovels and would shovel up the crickets. Why are you guys laughing? They would shovel up the crickets and then they would empty the crickets into those boxes and nail the top shut and put them in the back of the truck and haul them back off to Michigan. And we didn't know what they were doing with them. We honestly didn't care. They were out of our hair. And there was one ranger though. She got curious. She did. Well, she got curious and she went outside to one of those truck drivers one day and asked them, "So what in the world do you guys do with these cave crickets?" And he said that, well, we're taking them to Michigan. We're actually selling them to a brewing company because what they would do is they would take the crickets, they would grind them up, and they would put that in the beer. And she thought that was disgusting, and she expressed that, and she said, why in the world would you do that? And he said, because everybody knows Kentucky cave crickets have the best hops. Say that one for the end.
It's gonna be a
So you
goal.
guys went
It's
around.
going to be a
This is our
Remember in
final
Canada?
stop together.
Waiting
We'll be on the, we took one bus here, we
Waiting
take
a
one
fire
bus
out.
back.
Yeah.
This is the last
Uh-huh.
time I'm gonna talk to all of us as a group, other than the bus ride back to the visitor center.
That
But I hope you guys enjoyed the cave tour. I like talking about George. I like talking about the history of this part of the cave. A lot of people, they love the geology of this part of the cave. I love the geology too. I think it's fascinating. But I really love the history. I love the history of Mammoth Cave in general. Now, I hope I was able to teach you guys about it. Maybe to tell you some things you didn't already know, which you already knew about George. I don't know why you want this cave tour. But if I hope I inspired you to come back, go on some more cave tours. We have a lot of other rangers with a lot of other stories to tell. We've got a lot more to learn about than what we covered today. So keep coming back, keep going on cave tours. If you don't want to come back here, caving's not your thing, that's okay. There's over 419 other national park sites. Everything from national parks to national battlefields to monuments to historic sites. Just keep on going out there, keep visiting those. Learn about our cultural history as a nation, not just Mammoth Cave, but just everything as a nation. Learn about the science that allows us to exist here, to allow us to have this history that we've got, and why we need to protect not just our cultural heritage, but to protect our planet for future generations, so we can carry on that tradition of discovery and curiosity. So on behalf of myself, my wonderful friend and partner, Ranger Alicia, the National Park Service, thank you guys for joining us today. I'll see you on the surface. And coming up, we have an option. Quit laughing back there. We have an option. Since you guys are such a good group, I'm going to let you go into a bonus area called the Drapery Room. It's at the bottom of the Frozen Niagara. Now, I don't take everybody there, but you guys are so good, I'm gonna cut you some slack, all right? We're gonna go down to the Drapery Room. It's 49 optional stairs down, 49 mandatory stairs that'll take you back up the other side. I'll do the math for you. That's 98 extra stairs. You need a Kentuckian to do math for you, that's bad. But you've got 98 extra stairs. If you don't want to do it, you can hang up at the top. You can hang at the top where there's a gate. You just wait there. I'll make my way back up the other side and open that gate and let you on through, and then we'll exit the cave from there.
What's down in the drapery room?
More formations. So it's seeing the Frozen Niagara from a different perspective.
Okay.
Yeah, it's worth the trip if you got it in you. If you don't got it in you, then you're not going to be missing much, because there's a lot more pretty formations to see on the way out. Sound good? Good. All right. Thank you, guys.
Thanks.
That's all I'm here. Moral support.
It's difficult to see the path. There's Frozen Niagara right there. Right there. Frozen Niagara. It's beautiful.
If we come on up this way, and then we'll exit the cave altogether.
Smile. Smile.
So we do go.
You're not smiling?
No big deal.
You wasn't smiling.
Might as well
So this is the bridge.
right here. That's awesome. Look at that. You just can't see that much because can you take pictures?
Yeah.
Look at that.
I'll go in town.
Now that is just beautiful. Man. Look at that. I'm under it all. Holy.
Old black and white photograph of these guys sitting right here on the edge, eating their lunch with their feet hanging off the side. Or something called ocean.
There's a few more people down
Oh,
there.
thank you.
Are there more people down there? Huh? Do you see more people down there?
I think so, there's two.
Yeah. You gotta be here to appreciate it. It's hard to see it by way of camera. Okay. More stuff. It's beautiful. The one above you looks beautiful. You just can't see it though. Look how beautiful that is. I think we're gonna go down there, right? No? Okay, there's more here.
Oh, I agree. You know, some
What? This is way better though.
Is it?
Heck yeah.
I love this historic tour.
Historic tour is good, but they don't have the formations just
Right.
because it's really
Yeah.
dry.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's nice, you know, it's the natural opening and everything.
Yeah, I love the entrance.
It's
That's
cooler
what-
too, like
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah.
I have my jacket on, but I didn't really need it.
Yeah.
But, are you native of Kentucky or?
I was actually born in Maine,
Oh,
but
okay.
I was brought here when I was a little tiny,
And
like a
you just-
toddler. So I grew up here. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah, the other, I forgot.
That's why he has that dry Kentucky humor, you know. Thank you, sir.
Thank you guys.
Very,
See you on
very,
the bus.
very good tour.
Thanks.
This one is about to fall. That was it. Now that was a very good tour. It was beautiful. Almost fell a few times. Oh god. Okay. The camera is now foggy because it's very humid here. Hot and humid. My glasses are foggy now. What is it?
I think it's caterpillar. There's two different and that one.
Okay, we're done with the cave tour. That was the
You wanna just do
that was the dripstone, right?
Oh, is it the
The dome and dripstones.
Yeah.
That was the dome and dripstones. Yesterday we did the historical tour. Today it's.
I think that's the same as we saw over there, but
Oh
bigger,
yeah,
but bigger.
oh yes.
Oh, a caterpillar.
Yeah, just a bigger one.
Yeah, that's a big one. I think
you wanna
that's
just
probably the one. Those are probably the ones
Good
that
meal for
turn
a
to
bird.
butterfly.
You know, on
See that? The one turns to butterfly, right?
A moth.
A moth. Yeah, this one's a moth. Butterfly.
If nobody kills it.
Well, no one's gonna kill it.
Stuff on it by accident.
Some bird's probably gonna eat it, but
So you wanna try the there's that boat